The Bonneville Shoreline Trail has been under construction for 30 years. Join me, Brandon Plewe, and my son Spencer as we hike the 200-mile length of the BST to learn about its past, present, and future, and explore the landscape of this boundary between the city and the wilderness. We're picking up the trail today here this morning at Bell's Canyon. Bell's is just one of my favorite kind of Wasatch Front backyard trails, short trails. It's just so beautiful here. People don't often think about it as part of the Bonneville Shoreline Trail, but we'll connect the dots here in a minute. One of the things about Bell's Canyon and Little Cottonwood Canyon is they're just so different from the rest of the Wasatch Front. So I thought this would be a great place to come and talk about the geology of this area and why it's so different. So our guest today is Ron Harris. Morning, Ron. Ron is a professor of geology at BYU, so geography, geology. Make sure you get that straight or we'll both be offended. So let's talk a little bit about this.
Okay.
So first off, the first thing you notice is that the rock is different. This granite that we have here, that you don't really have a lot of granite elsewhere. What caused that? Why does this area have this granite?
There's a large intrusion that it came up and essentially filled a large space here with granite from magma that cooled. There was also a volcano above this.
Okay.
You can see the remnants of that on the sides, but most of it's been eroded off here.
How long ago?
That was about 35 million years ago.
35 million years, okay. I mean, we see it on a lot of buildings in the Salt Lake Valley, like the temple and,
yes,
and such, but I can see why they came all the way down here to get that rock. So we have this big mass of granite, and it was just kind of right here, Lone Peak, Little Cottonwood Canyon really is that mass of rock.
Yeah, it's lighter colored, it's the white you can see. And again, you look up there and you don't see any layering at all, but you do see really steep cliffs. And so it made the glaciers that came down, they cut deeper channels and also were able to funnel the ice further into the valley.
So when we have the glaciers, so, 20,000, 18,000 years ago, I mean, all of these mountains had glaciers up at the top of them, and yet this is the only place where they came down this far.
If you have a narrower channel, then you're going to have more ice flow through it further down because it's going to be going at a faster rate.
Well, this is your kind of classic moraine makeup here. All these different kinds of rock, different sizes of rock, all the way down to just dust. What have we got here?
Well, we've got pieces of granite, obviously, but lots of different types of granite. Some is darker, some is lighter, and that's just because we have magma being pumped into the chamber, different kinds. But then all of this usually gets onto the glacier because the glacier undercuts the sides of the valley wall, causes these big rock falls and landslides.
So it's all landing on top of the glacier.
Like a conveyor belt. And then the glacier just carries them down and they drop off the front. And so that's why there's so many different kinds and different sizes, and most of them are not rounded. Notice most of these are pretty angular because once they get onto the conveyor belt, there's nothing that's going to round them.
Like a stream that would have rolled them around.
Yeah, you would have had more sorting from the stream and also more roundness.
So the glacier would have ended right here.
Yeah.
And just dumped all that at the end. I guess at one time, this would have been a solid dam all the way across here.
Yeah.
And the lake probably would have been much higher then.
The lake eventually spilled over and started eroding down, and this is where it is now.
And because it's so much dust, it's really easy to erode down through that.
Yep.
And cuts down to where this is now.
Sometimes these are suspended in really awkward positions because of how carefully they're dropped. They don't roll down. It's like they hover down.
So that is just a perfect view of a glacial valley there. That classic U shape. I learned that in high school. That U shape. And then what are these two ridges of boulders we see? What do we call those?
Moraines.
Those are the
lateral moraines.
Lateral moraines. So that's getting dumped on either side of the glacier, lateral meaning side, as it comes out. But it's just perfect. It's those two perfect ridges coming out. But more impressive than that is this cliff face we see right along here. So what's that?
So that scar has formed since the glaciers left. And the nice thing is we more or less know how long ago that was. But it's because the glacier flowed over the Wasatch Fault. And then when the glacier melted, the Wasatch Fault has remained active, and so it has broken through those moraines, and you can actually see how far it's offset them.
Right, because I can see down there, I can see there's the ridge there.
Yeah.
And there's the ridge up there.
Right, and those used to be the same location, and it went like this.
How many earthquakes and how long did it take to, because that's what, 30 meters there of break?
Yeah, it is. Usually each time the Wasatch Fault moves along one of its segments, like the Salt Lake City segment, it's about 2 to 3 meters of slip per event. And so if that's 30 meters and it did it 3 meters per event, that's 10. So between 10 to 15 earthquakes have formed that. The whole Wasatch Fault is active, but the reason why you can see it here is because we have these glacial features, which are very young, whereas a lot of times you don't get those kind of markers that you can then calculate what the slip rate is.
So isn't this one of the few places where we actually have some idea of the year when major Wasatch Fault earthquake?
Yeah, so there's trenches that we've dug into the fault that allow us to trace markers and get ages on those markers. The last big earthquake here was 1,350 years ago.
Okay.
That means that at a slip rate of about 2 to 3 millimeters per year, we have already accumulated the 2 to 3 meters that usually happens during an earthquake.
So we're due. We keep hearing that.
We're very due.
But we're due.
And a 2 to 3 meter slip along the whole length of this segment would produce a magnitude 7 to 7.1 earthquake. The epicenter would be out in the valley. The Salt Lake City segment, unfortunately, is the one that has accumulated the most strain. So along the entire Wasatch Fault, Salt Lake City is going to be the most hazardous part.
So the Wasatch Mountains are formed by that fault, by this movement. So for all of that movement, over the course of what, 20 million years,
mm-hmm.
How much do they think that's totally displaced?
6 miles.
6 miles. So we've had
So if you want to see these rocks that the granite intruded under the valley, you'd have to drill 6 miles down to find them.
That's a lot of lake fill.
Yeah. So how far does this trail go?
Well, it ends right there. Those people are about to get lost. We were last over there. You can kind of see just that little bit of the bench there, and the trail ends there at Rocky Mouth, kind of in those canyons, and that just dead ends there. So there's a dead end. Between there and here, Sandy City has plans to build it, but it's private property going quite a ways up into the hills here, and so it might be a little while to connect that to here, and then we can use the Bells Canyon Trail for a while, and then they'll have to build another one to get around into Little Cottonwood Canyon.
Yeah, so this is a good place to see the actual dip of the Wasatch Fault. So that slope that we see coming down, that's actually
that's the fault.
The fault itself, and you can see it going right underneath the valley there.
All right, well, let's keep going. So here we see the fault scarp again here. So this is now a moraine, but this is what? The moraine for?
Little Cottonwood Canyon.
Little Cottonwood Canyon. So that's this glacier left this moraine. So at some point, the trail here will probably wrap around this moraine and go up into Little Cottonwood Canyon. But there's some property concerns and some wilderness concerns here, so it's probably gonna be a while. So we'll wrap up this section of trail. But thanks, Ron, for coming out today.
Thank you, Brandon.
This has been very enlightening and very educational, so we appreciate it. So have a great day.
All right, I'm going to keep hiking.
Okay, we'll see you.
Okay.